quick again. All right, I'll find it. Never mind.
Okay. Welcome to everyone that's coming in. We just want to give everyone a minute to get in the room, and we just want to welcome you all as you're coming in. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. We want to welcome you all to our 5th day of empathy. As you all are joining in, please drop your name and location in the chat. The National Day of Empathy is the biggest day of action for criminal justice reform in the country. This is hosted by DreamCorps Justice, and it's a day that brings together people who are formerly incarcerated or system impacted, as well as unlikely allies and power players to advance meaningful legislative change. So today on our 5th day of empathy, not only are we gathering as people from across political divides and across the country to this virtual event, the goal is to elevate leadership and experiences of those impacted by our system and provide a platform to share their solutions to fix it. So please know that this is not the only event that we plan on hosting here in Ohio. This is just the first of many conversations on these issues. Our goal is to follow up on these issues and ask that you continue to engage us beyond this day. So in addition, DreamCorps Justice will be hosting a national event today at 5 o'clock. And we're going to drop in the chat how you can get involved in that as well. Matthew is our person that is going to be assisting us today with DreamCorps Justice. So he will also be dropping in the chat how you all can stay engaged beyond this with the larger group and our partner organizations. We are asking that you use the Q&A area for questions that you have for any team members or panelists. So today, we're going to hear from our Day of Empathy team partners. Each of them have been impacted by the system in a variety of different ways, and they will pose a question to our panelists who are local and state leaders here in Ohio, as well as people who are doing policy work in this space. So we will have each of our system and policy leaders take about 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their work. And then we're going to have our team members take another 3 minutes to share their story and then ask questions of the panelists. And we'll ask that we just keep those brief. This portion of the event will last until 1 p.m. And we know that people may need to jump off, but we will remain on for another 15 minutes just to try to go through the Q&A. And if we don't get through that entire Q&A section, what we're going to do is make sure that we follow up with you all with those answers to those questions. So please feel free to drop them again in the Q&A area. So let's go ahead and get started and introduce our panelists. And we just want to thank everyone who did decide to join us today. And we're going to start with our system and policy panelists and just having them again introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Representative Brent.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juanita Brent. I just happen to be a state representative for Ohio House District 12. I'm so glad to be here. I represent the southeast portion of Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland and 9 other suburbs. And criminal justice is such a key component to everyday parts of our lives, no matter to where we live, to how we get our jobs, to how you're being educated, and how you're dealing with your community. And as a legislator, I'm always fighting for justice for the people I serve.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we will have Andrew Gessler with the Buckeye Institute.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. Like Zara said, I'm Andrew Geisler from the Buckeye Institute. I'm a legal fellow at the Buckeye Institute. We're a free market public policy research organization that seeks to promote good public policy in the states. My primary area of focus is to work on criminal justice policy and kind of generally work on behalf of comprehensive criminal justice reform. So we've done a lot of work on things like drug sentencing reform, last General Assembly, do a lot of active work on issues like bail reform, some of those sorts of issues. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone. I'm really appreciative for everyone having me here today, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, we will have Mel Wilson with the NASW.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mel Wilson with National Association of Social Workers. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for NASW. NASW, as many of you know, is a national organization, about 110,000 members with chapters in each state. My portfolio really has been around social justice, but a lot of concentration on criminal justice, the whole full range of criminal justice, including drug policy, bail reform, reentry, you name it. And we work very closely with national coalitions around criminal justice reform. And like the rest, I'm very happy to have been invited to be a part of this event and look forward to talking to folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Baldwin.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I am Carla Baldwin, and I'm proud to serve as the administrative and presiding judge at Youngstown Municipal Court. We are a small court, but we do a lot of good work. We are champions of reforming the court system to make it work for everyone who has to access it. So I'm proud to preside over our Veterans Treatment Court, our drug court, and to serve as project champion. As we so happy to be here. I am Carla Services project. So happy to be here. I'm one who believes that the system is not broken, as many people say. It's working as it is designed. Unfortunately, it's not working for most of the people who have to use it, especially people who look like me. So I'm committed to being a system interrupter and doing a better job at making the system accessible for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Bloom.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning still. My name is Carrie Bloom. I am the newly seated judge in the Hamilton County Juvenile Court. Before becoming judge, I was a public defender for 10 years. And so I worked very closely in the system and sadly as part of a system, but that I believe we're going to speak some about today. I'm very happy to be in my new role where I can see things from a higher level as the judge before me just mentioned. And I'm eager to speak with each of you and to learn about how we can do better going forward.
Thank you. Recorder McClain.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon McClain. I'm the Montgomery County Recorder. I was elected in 2018. Prior to that, I served as a magistrate and acting judge in Dayton Municipal Court. Prior to that, I was an assistant public defender for Montgomery County. I'm also a veteran. A lot of hats that I've been blessed to be able to wear in my life. However, the most important role I believe that we all occupy is as concerned citizen. As concerned citizens, I believe that we should all be public servants. And I've been fortunate to be a public servant. I believe that as a public servant, we have an inherent duty to serve all facets of our community, particularly the least of these. And so I'm looking forward in sharing this space with all of you and talking about how we can do better to build a stronger community and a stronger Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Councilman Glenn.
I'm not a technology guy. You can hear me?
We can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Derry Glenn. I'm City Councilman in Lima, Ohio. I've been in City Council for 25 years. Also, I'm a doctor at Coleman Professional. I handle addiction, and anyone who's on heroin or having any kind of counseling problem with their family, anything, that's one of my jobs. Also, I do numerous things in our community in Lima, Ohio. Right now, we're working on a lot of issues in our court system with our youth. We're working correlate with NAACP. So we have a lot of issues here in Lima that we're working on right now. I'm dealing with housing, dealing with the COVID-19, but I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be invited. I know I'm trying to work on my computer right now. I'm doing it off my phone right now. I'm running late, getting back to the house, but I appreciate all the work and I appreciate everyone. Welcome to be on the screen here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. And we do have a few other people that may be joining us a little later. So when they come on, I will make sure that we give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. So what we're going to do is now hear from our awesome Day of Empathy team and partners here in the state of Ohio. We're going to start with Ray Green, who's going to just, again, introduce himself, a little bit about his story, his work, and he will be leading with the first question.
Good morning, everyone. All of our distinguished panelists, such an honor to be here with all of you fighting the righteous fight. I am Reverend Raymond Green Jr. I am the executive director of the Freedom BLOC. The Freedom BLOC is geared towards and in the process of building up a political home for Black people, a place where we can develop our own political ideology, our own political acumen, and begin to create policies that negate 400 years of draconian policies that continue to imprison and dehumanize Black people, brown people, and poor people all over the world. I am a four-time convicted felon, formerly incarcerated person myself. So I'm bringing that expertise into this field and also the expertise of living in poverty into this field as a direct correlation that fuels the mass incarceration system. And my question is, will you support policies that fully restore the rights of formerly incarcerated people, including the rights to bear arms? We have just witnessed in Ohio where the Republicans or the GOP have finally succeeded in passing the Stand Your Ground law. As a father of 10 children, a father of 7 daughters, formerly incarcerated, I believe my ability not to carry a weapon to defend my family is a civil rights violation. How does the panel and law and legislators propose to deal with that situation of formerly incarcerated people not having their rights fully restored and being able to legally protect their families?
Thank you, Ray. So we're going to start with Recorder McClain, if you want to start this off, and then we'll also hear from Mel.
Firstly, thank you so much for the question. Personally, I will always support policies which seek to humanize those who are entering back into society, particularly those who are convicted of less serious or nonviolent offenses. Throughout my life, served as a soldier. I'm a veteran. As an attorney, as I've already said, member of the court, now as a county official. I believe most important role that we all occupy is that of a concerned citizen. As concerned citizens, we must always remain vigilant soldiers in this war of equality, because what affects one person directly ultimately impacts us all indirectly. And we're talking about our community. We know that a suppressed people leads to a suppressed nation. Currently, one of the most attacked rights of formerly incarcerated people is their right to vote. That's why this past year, I specifically organized voting drives. I worked with our ex-offender reentry office that we have here in Montgomery County, and we focused on what needed to happen so that we can inform and restore the voting rights of ex-offenders, many of which didn't even know that they still had that right to vote. Whether through suppression or disenfranchisement, people who are returning home have been met with misinformation and legal barriers about if they even have a right to vote. That ultimately impacts not only them being criminalized a second time after they're released, but also it minimizes their overall citizenship. We've all been told that your voice is your vote, yet here we are at a point where we have to acknowledge that there is a concentrated effort, certainly in Ohio, certainly throughout this country, to silence those who have repaid their debt. So we must continue to take a stand, because when one person is cut by injustice, we all bleed a little.
Yeah, let me add to what Recorder McClain said. Speaking from a national perspective and very much on the issue of restoration of voting rights. Right now, we're involved with the Democracy Restoration Act, which actually is going to be reintroduced within the next couple of days. It is a comprehensive piece of legislation out of Congress that restores the rights of formerly incarcerated and those with felony convictions, their right to vote. This is an effort that is happening in a big mobilization at the national level. There's another piece of legislation called HR 1, which is For the People Act. It's the most important legislation for the Democratic House right now and the Senate. And part of that will be the Voter Restoration Act. We, NASW, are part of major coalitions that are rallying to make sure this piece of legislation gets passed. It's going to take a great deal of effort at not just the national level, certainly from all the states. mobilization. You'll get big resistance from the Republicans. We know that. But part of our effort right now is to mobilize, do actions, do everything we can to make sure that the rights of those who are convicted of felons and those who have been in the justice system have their rights restored. And this is really critical because there's a racial implication to this because of the number of African Americans and men and women of color who don't have their right to vote and therefore can't participate in some critical elections. So that's something that is of prime importance, I know, at the national level.
Thank you. And I just want to lift up, when we talk about, restoring rights, like there are so many collateral sanctions and consequences to, being incarcerated and having a felony conviction. And, these issues and these topics are so important to address. Like when we talk about, full restoration, I think that that's what we really need to be looking at. I think that it's going to be challenging when we kind of piecemeal things, but definitely voting is important. And as Ray mentioned, like it's just so critical that all of our rights are restored and people have that ability to exercise their rights and as well as protect their family. So we just want to thank you all for that. And we're going to continue these conversations as we go along, just kind of keeping that in mind. So next we're going to hear from Taylor, who's going to share a little bit about her story and also ask a question to our panel.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. Again, I just want to honor everybody in this space right now for the work that you guys do. So my name is Taylor Pennington, and I am the founder of the Free Billy Movement. The Free Billy Movement was created to raise awareness to William Pennington, a wrongfully convicted man who has been in Ohio prison for almost 11 years for a crime that he did not commit. So we began the Free Billy Movement to raise awareness around his case, present more evidence, new evidence, and also get his case reopened so that he can get back into court. We have also worked with countless other organizations around Ohio to address other issues that lead to wrongful convictions, such as the cash bail system, which also leads to false confessions and different things like that. So that has been the main focus of the Free Billy Movement, is releasing William Pennington and also addressing those issues. Ohio currently has 83 registered exonerees over the past 30 years, and there's still currently 2,000 people projected to be in Ohio prisons who are wrongfully incarcerated based off of the Ohio Innocence Project. So my question for the legislators on the call tonight is, what are some of the progressive actions that Ohio will be taking to address this issue of wrongful convictions, such as implementing conviction integrity units throughout each county in Ohio, and also amending the mediator immunity laws in Ohio so that our elected officials can be held more accountable.
Representative Brent, would you like to address this?
Yes, thank you so much, Taylor, for your question. What you're just saying is huge, and it's something that should have been implemented to actually give people security when they're first entering the criminal justice system. Particularly, there was a bill that was introduced by one of my colleagues, Representative West, where if you are you're a juvenile, you have to have someone present during the interrogation process, which brings some type of security. When we think of the Central Park 5 of that situation, they were all young men who were underneath the age of 18 who didn't have anybody that was there. So we have to have some type of integrity and check and balance systems within that. So that's one bill that's been introduced within the General Assembly, this 134th. Also about making sure that all times when people are being questioned, that is actually being recorded for the audio and also for the video during that time period. So we have to have some type of way of knowing what's happened, and also just cracking down, particularly on our ethics laws. We've had a huge situation here at the State House where a particular colleague of mine received $61 million. They are currently still in office. These are accusations, so let me clear that up. They were accused of taking $61 million worth of bribes, but we have to develop more of a situation of integrity So there has been a bill that's been introduced, but the biggest thing, we have a lot of good policy that's on the table, but people have to elect people that's going to vote in good policy. So people always push back and say like, Ohio's not as progressive as we should, and we're not doing what we should. We have to elect people that's going to be willing to vote the green button to have those bits of integrity added into our laws. That's our biggest stumbling block, is that we don't have people who want integrity placed on the books because it does not benefit them, because they might be the ones who own the charter schools. And so now they're making laws to manipulate how charter schools can get more money. And so now, instead of your baby getting more money for the public schools, the charter schools get more money because they own the charter school. So we need more of a check and balance system. So people have to really think about who the legislators are. We have a legislator who owns a sports team. We have a legislator that owns the popcorn company. We have a legislator that owns a firearm company that makes guns, the same guns that are on the streets. And they're the same people who are making these laws. So if we are not really cracking down on the ethics laws that are happening within the state of Ohio, it's still going to continue to be problematic for us every day.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to respond to this particular question? Just want to be able to give people an opportunity. Okay, so we have Robin Turner who has joined us. Welcome, Robin. If you could just introduce yourself, and then you can pose your question to the panels, please.
Thank you, Zaria. So again, my name is Robin Turner. I am a social justice organizer here in Cleveland, Ohio, with the organization called Ohio Organizing Collaborative. I am also a restored citizen here in the city of Cleveland, Ohio. My question to the panel is, how do you feel about restorative justice? And is restorative justice something that maybe we can look in regards to implementing more in regards to the carceral system?
Thank you, Robin. So I'm gonna ask if Judge Baldwin and Judge Bloom wanna start with this one.
Hello, Robin, and thank you for your work. I am a believer in restorative justice because I think at the base, restoration is about healing. And most of the issues that we see in the courtroom are the pain of our communities. So I think anytime we can create a situation where an offender gets to have contact with the victim and they can engage in a healing conversation, I think that will be a great motivator for change. Yes, I think if we have more of that, if we have more mediations, if we have more conversations, then we will lead to more effective conflict resolution. And my hope is that we will be able to divert more people out of the system who enter the system and use that as a platform where they can engage in an effective conversation and hopefully change their behaviors, which leads to a better community. So I am indeed a fan of restorative justice and hope to implement a strong mediation program in my court so that we help to heal our community, because municipal courts are the ER of the court system. So we get it all first. And so we want to be able to effectively triage those situations, provide healing, and lead both parties back out into the community in a better position as to where we met them. So thank you for your question, Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And to add to what Judge Baldwin said, so many times what we see in the court system is that people who are defendants today have either been victimized before or victims on a crime or will be in the future. And unfortunately, until we find a way to stop the cycle, I guess, and give the aid and assistance that we need to prevent that victimization, what we have is people who keep coming through the court and not being addressed as those who are experiencing trauma as well, or who have been treated as a defendant and perhaps locked up or given a harsh penalty before, and it starts to discredit our system. And so restorative justice helps with, I believe, helps with the open conversation, like Judge Baldwin was saying, of how do we send people back out into their community, into our communities, with a way to interact together, with a way to coexist, because no matter what, people are going back into their communities, especially the juvenile court where I work, especially the municipal court where Judge Baldwin is. People are going back home. They are going to their communities. And we have to have a way to connect them together as humans at their core, where they have the tools to work together to prevent future injustice, no matter if that's criminal or not. The other thing that I think we have to do, and in my role as a judge, I take responsibility for, is to continue training and offer training and conversation to the people who are in the court system as staff. A lot of times there are people who have devoted their careers to working in a courthouse or working in the criminal justice system. And we all know that I guess the trajectory or the arc of how we have behaved in our criminal justice system has changed a lot. And here we are again, trying to change it even more. And what we have to do is make sure that that change is seen as just what it is: change, positive change, and not scary change. Because when we offer something new, and even if it seems like not more work or not different work, but it's new, it can be frightening at times. And so I think that's for us as leaders to explain and to lead by example, and to make sure that we put in the work so that our colleagues and our coworkers are aware of what's happening and why it is that we want to progress, and we want to involve more people in our court cases, and have more conversation.
Thank you. Recorder McClain, were you interested in chiming in on this as well?
Yeah, just very briefly, I would echo many of the sentiments from the two judges that just spoke. I certainly believe in the power of restorative justice. I believe that Archbishop Desmond Tutu said it best, that the most difficult words that can be uttered by any person is "I'm sorry." However, we have to remember that once those words are uttered, they serve as a roadmap to new opportunity. The possibility of new beginnings begins to churn, and there's a start for people to begin anew. That chance for a new and fresh beginning is for people who have been convicted of offenses, and also those who are labeled as victims. There's a healing moment for both. They both heal from that trauma of that past encounter together, and that benefits the community. Justice becomes not just defined by how much punishment is given to an offender, but rather by how much harm has been repaired or prevented in the community. And as both judges indicated, that's so important because, as we know, for folks who are coming home, they're entering back into the community. These are our neighbors. The benefits from restorative justice are long-term. They empower individuals. They reduce a certain level of fear from a certain action happening again, saves money for communities because it reduces recidivism, the rate of reoffending. And for most victims, that's the most important priority, is making sure that it doesn't happen again, not just to them, but for other people in the community. We also look at the fact that crime is not just about a law being broken, but rather about the harm that's caused to people, relationships, and overall the community. So to me, restorative justice is not just about addressing the wrongdoing, but also about making sure there's a repair aspect to the neighborhood, to the relationships, and ultimately to the community. So when we look at that and the fact that ex-offenders are coming back to the community, why wouldn't we want to heal them?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to pose this question to our policy experts here. This is around the bail reform conversation. So we have this movement that's happening all over the country right now. We just saw Illinois pass the in-cash bail legislation. And so just want to lift up this particular issue. So what are the bail reform efforts that are being made here in Ohio? And then what are you all also seeing on a national level as it relates to the ending of the cash bail system or just overall bail reform efforts? So we will go to both of our policy experts that are on here, Mel and Andrew.
Again, speaking from a national level, this is one of the priority issues that's been so for at least the last 5 years on a national level with the coalitions. Obviously, what cash bail does is criminalize poverty. And that's something that is completely unacceptable. We at NASW have actually written a social justice brief that calls for the end of cash bond. We use the example often of someone perhaps convicted of a marijuana possession charge where the bail may be $250, but this young person can't make bail, may wind up staying in jail for 4 months before a trial. And normally he will just walk with that charge. So that punishment, that unfair punishment that has a great deal of racial disparities tied to it, just can't be allowed to flourish. We need to look at ways when someone comes in pre-trial to divert away from even having to go to trial and being able to be released back to the community without a cash bond. I mean, there are circumstances, obviously, where it's just some really egregious or heinous crime where you don't want a person on the street, but that's very rare. Most cases, folks can be returned back to the community pre-trial, go to trial, and go through the normal process without having to be concerned about making bail. And bail is not fair. It varies from state to state. There's no national standard for what a bail should be. So anything that is that ambiguous, hurtful, does need not only reform, it needs to end.
Yeah, and I can jump in from a Ohio specific perspective. Over the last couple of years, there was a new state criminal procedure rule that deals with bail that kind of went through the process and took effect on the 1st of July, actually. So the rule went through a lot of different iterations and, sort of in some ways improved things marginally, if not in improving things as much as many of us here would hope. It shifts the legal presumption away from cash bail as the default setting sort of in this system and requires judges to impose the least restrictive conditions of release and things like that. So obviously very positive kind of direction there, but it also still allows for cash bail in a few circumstances, the flight risk circumstances, the main one, but then also at the very end, they brought back in sort of the idea of a broad public safety kind of justification for imposing cash bail, which is the most concerning kind of change that, like I said, happened at the very last second in that process after this 2-year kind of bail reform process through the Ohio Supreme Court's rulemaking process. So with that, you see there's still plenty of room for reform in Ohio, reform that doesn't use cash as a proxy for safety and reform that would put some procedural safeguards, I think, around those least restrictive conditions, things like making sure that there's a process in place to make sure that a judge isn't imposing more of a bond or any bond when somebody literally just can't pay for it. The idea of cash bail being something that often, like Mel said, does criminalize poverty. So there's been some forward momentum, I think, in the state over the last few years and through that process, but there's still room for more to do on this issue for sure. And it's something that I think there's a lot of interest, from even like the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court on this issue. So this is something that I think we could hopefully see some positive change on here very soon.
If I can really quickly add something to bail reform, the whole issue of risk assessment, to the point that was just made about flight risk or risk of criminalization. We at a national level are very concerned about those risk assessments. We think they're prejudiced. We think that they do not reflect for Black communities and Latino communities, that there's a bias, a implicit bias in those assessments and the evaluation of those assessments as they go before the court. So there is through the ACLU and others have really fought those risk assessments as being a part of condition of being released pre-trial.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that's interested in speaking on the bail reform efforts here in Ohio?
I'll speak to that just briefly. We established a pretrial services unit in my court back in 2019, and we're continuing to modify that with assistance from the Center for Effective Public Policy and Advancing Public Policy and Research. And I think we are moving in the right direction. The wheels of justice, as we know, move slow. And I think what we have to do is be intentional. And so as we talk about the elimination of cash bail, which I think is a positive move, I think we either will have to get to the point where we say this person is a known danger to the community, so we think they should be held behind bars, or we have to trust this person to give them an opportunity to show up to court on their own. until we get to that point, I just want everyone to be mindful as we move that electronically monitored house arrest is an alternative to incarceration. But we have to be cautious and be intentional when applying that we don't create a default prison system by incarcerating people in their own home. So I think we're making progress, but I think we always have to be intentional. We always have to keep data, and the numbers don't lie. So if our numbers show that there's bias and discrepancy, even with improved reform efforts, we have to continue to do the work because we're talking about individuals' life and liberty at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are really good points that you all made. We're going to move to Michelle, who's going to just introduce herself and her work and ask her next question for the panelists.
Hi, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you all for everything that you do. So my name is Michelle Smith Lewis, and I am the founder of Faith Freedom Life. We are a faith-based nonprofit organization that exists to serve families of the incarcerated via community and connections. We are currently running bi-weekly support groups on Zoom because of COVID going extremely well. We also offer bags of empowerment for people returning home and also for families that have a main provider inside. And those bags are filled with everything that we use on a daily basis. We provide education that is filtered through our support groups and are currently in the process of developing more programming to support families. So my question is, will you support the use of body cams inside prisons and jails for the protection of both the people inside and correction officers?
Do we have any panelists that would be interested in taking this question on?
This is Rep. Brent. When it comes to body cameras, the body cameras has to be the first step, but we realize with situations that recently just even happened here in Franklin County, it cannot be the only step because officer can fully have a camera, but if they are not being held accountable for their actions or moving their body away or turning their camera off when situations are happening, it means nothing. So we have to have a system in place, and there's legislation that's being written right now actually by Rep. Crawley, who's a state rep here in Franklin County, to actually address that. I believe it's going to be called Andre's Law. Correct me later if that's not the correct name of it, but it will be dealing with making sure there are parameters about having body cameras and not just having them, but also making sure that officers are held accountable for making sure they are turned on and what type of footage that is being received when we review over that too.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope that we can get some follow-up information on that as that is launched. And I know we have some people here that are actively engaged in that work. So we will have to make sure that we connect them with Representative Crawley on that. So we want to welcome Senator Antonio to the panel. We knew that she'd be joining us a little later. Welcome. So we'd like for you to just take a minute and introduce yourself, and then I'm gonna ask you a few questions about the work you're currently working on around the death penalty repeal and SB 18.
Well, thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me. A day of empathy, I love it. Who doesn't need that? We all could use that, I think. My name is Nikki Antonio. I'm the state senator for District 23, which is Lakewood and Cleveland, right along the lake. And then it comes south on 71 through some suburbs and ends up in Parma and Middleburg Heights, and kind of everything in between. I have served in the House for 8 years, and now I'm serving in my 3rd year in my first term in the Senate. We have 4-year terms in the Senate, and I have prioritized working for families, the people in my district, all families, and definitely have been inspired, I think, by the people who work every day to gain social justice for all of the people in the district as well. And that was important to me before I became a legislator. And I believe that that work is an important part of what I do now as a legislator as well.
Thank you. And we're glad that you're able to join us today. So I know that there was recently a press release in regards to the death penalty repeal. So what are the plans for the bill that will end the death penalty here in Ohio?
Yes, thank you so much for asking me about that. We had a very exciting press conference last week where for the first time we're introducing, I've been working on ending the death penalty since I came to the legislature, and some folks have worked on it long before I got here. But the difference this time is that we have a team of legislators that is a bipartisan team working on ending the death penalty. So in the Senate, we have, I have a co-sponsor, a joint sponsor, Steve Huffman, and then we have Christina Robner, Michael Ruley, and a number of other legislators that have joined on to end the death penalty in the Senate. And then in the House, there is also a bipartisan team being developed over there to end the death penalty as well. And we're going to introduce companion bills. There's a lot been going on in the past few years. One of the things that's really changed is we have a long list of the reasons why the death penalty needs to be repealed and in the state of Ohio. And the list runs the gamut of some folks are supporting the bill because they are proponents of they identify through their faith as pro-life. Some people understand that it is extraordinarily expensive and that we could be using the funds for other things. We also understand that there's a disproportionate toll that gets played on and put on people, especially people of color and low income people, when it comes to using the death penalty as a leverage for people to, especially, and then it's disproportionately charged in certain counties, my county of Cuyahoga County being one of the worst. And we've also talked to families of victims, and they have told us that they will never get their loved one back, but they would like to move on with their lives. And the death penalty and the constant appeals re-victimizes them every time. So, and there are many other reasons as well. They're unable to even execute someone right now. And one of the things that's happened is some former advocates of the death penalty have now come out very strongly against the death penalty and are urging a repeal, including former Justice Pfeiffer, former Attorney General, and Petro, and a host of other folks. And so I really believe and Virginia is the latest to repeal the death penalty. I really believe that Ohio is right on the cusp of being able to do the same. It's a new day.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. And so while I have you kind of sharing, if you'd be interested in just sharing a little bit more in regards to an update with SB 18, which is prohibiting, restraining, and confining pregnant women that are incarcerated.
Yeah. So a number of years ago, an emergency room nurse contacted me. And what was really wonderful about this particular nurse, her name is Maureen Sweeney, is that she was a former student with one of my kids when they both went to high school together, and they played soccer together. And she contacted me and she said, I have seen women with handcuffs to the side of the bed when they came in to deliver a baby because they came from a jail or a prison. And we started looking into this whole this whole practice of shackling pregnant women. And what we found out, you know, the rules in the jails were all created for men. And when they started incarcerating women at obnoxious, outrageous numbers right now, but that's a different topic. But when they started doing that, all of the rules that were in place for transporting a prisoner, for providing healthcare, for anything, were originally designed with men in mind. And so they just applied them to women. Well, obviously there were no previous rules on transporting a pregnant prisoner who's going to deliver a baby in a hospital. And so it's barbaric, it's certainly outdated, and extremely dangerous. Dangerous for the woman, because any of us who have ever been pregnant or have good friends who are pregnant know that as the pregnancy progresses, women are off balance. The last thing you want to do is restrain them in any way for their own safety and the safety of that unborn baby. So we worked on the bill a couple of years, and finally this past General Assembly, we were able to amend Senate Bill 18 into a criminal justice reform bill, House Bill 1. And so the bill was passed, and it will take effect, and it will prevent anyone in a jail or a prison from restraining a woman when she's pregnant, through her pregnancy, and then for a couple of months after as well. So this is moving Ohio into the 21st century, I feel like. There is a federal law, it was the first step law, and within that was an end to shackling on the federal level in federal prisons. Ohio now follows suit in our county and state jails as well.
That's awesome. I know some people that have been working really hard on that particular issue just nationally. So
yes,
I'm glad to hear that some of those things are being put in place. Thank you for sharing that. So next we're going to move to Kevin, who is going to introduce himself and then share a little bit about what he does, and then ask a question to our panel.
Thank you, Zaria, and thank you all. Greetings. I'm honored to be here on a day of empathy. And I live empathy every day. You know, I think it's the most virtuous characteristic. And, you know, empathy brings humans together and gives us the ability to connect and understand and create with each other. So I always spread empathy and try to share it. So I just appreciate that. My name is Kevin Baloo. I am a multidisciplinary creative, I guess, and a community organizer here in Cleveland. I work with the coalition, the Cuyahoga County Jail Coalition. And right now we're working on an Alternatives to Incarceration campaign. You know, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Cuyahoga County, but there's talks of a new county jail and talks of diversion centers, and there's a lot of money going around. And as we all understand here, you know, it takes healing and education to help people that are struggling, that find their way into this system. And I personally believe that to change any culture of destruction that might be out in the street, we need to change the system that has created this culture. And that's why, you know, I think it's so important that we invest more in diversion centers and alternatives and service programs, but it takes all of us working together to do that. I served 5 years at Marion Correctional Institution, and I was grateful that I was at Marion because the paradigm of Marion at the time was centered around healing and education. We had a community center where I was able to take classes from theater to yoga to Spanish to give a TEDx talk. The other thing that helped me out so much through my incarceration was having mentors, positive mentors, guys that have been down 20, 30 plus years, right? That understand themselves, understand this whole system and this collective system we're in. But a sad thing to see was oftentimes these guys who have gone through every program, who are leaders, who could change the world for the better. They'd go up to the parole board and they would continually get denied. And the parole board, as some people know or may not be privy to, has minimal accountability. So my question is, what implementations are being made to change the parole board or address some of these, the lack of accountability that the parole board has?
Thank you for that question. Representative Brent and anyone else that would like to speak on this?
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for your question and just sharing your story, because we need more people to tell their experience of how they are back here in society within our community contributing like you are. And we want everybody's story to be as similar to yours too, about contributing back in the community. But the biggest thing when it comes to the parole board, the General Assembly, which are your senators, your representatives like myself, we have to make a legislative change to bring more transparency. The shameful thing about what's going on now with the parole board is that there's no type of transparency. So when you go before the parole board, there's not a video, there's not an audio, there's not a transcript. It's basically your word against whoever was there about what happened with those interactions. And so when we really talk about returning people back to their communities, the first step is what happens within that parole board. And so we need to add that layer of transparency. We have Rep. Adam Miller, who is actually who's about to send out a co-sponsor request for a bill to add transparency for our parole board here within the state of Ohio. We thought maybe it was something that could be a rule change, but it actually has to go through the General Assembly. And like I always tell people, elections have consequences, because there is a tendency within our General Assembly that they do not like transparency. So we're gonna keep our fingers crossed that this actually goes through, because everything moves very slowly here in the General Assembly. But things like this should be basic. It's 2021 and people are still banning cameras when it comes to the process of people going through the criminal justice system. Make it make sense. So as we talk about, you know, our system, this is just one barrier of why people do not feel like the system is fighting for them, but more or less sometimes against them in these processes of going through the parole system.
Is there anyone else that's interested in speaking to the parole board? All right. So next we have Mike Mitchell with the Cincinnati All of Us or None chapter. Mike is going to just share a little bit about himself and ask his question.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Mitchell. I am the co-chair of All of Us or None, along with Dr. Zoya Davis and Chastity Bowman. And I'm also a restorative citizen. I served 125 months in federal prison for a very low-level drug offense. And I was sentenced to 125 months and 8 years supervision. But leading up, prior to going to federal prison, I served time in state prison for petty crimes and low-level drug offenses. But it all started in the juvenile system. I've been system impacted since I was 14 years old. I'm now currently 41, and I'm trying to get my life back on track. I've done a pretty good job of making that attempt. But as a child, like I said, when I was a juvenile, I was sentenced to State Center, Hillcrest, DYS, and then I graduated to the adult system, and then they sent me to federal prison. I have 6 felonies, but in my eyes, the 6 felonies was like one. It was so the crime was so petty. So although I'm not a juvenile anymore, I have juvenile children, and I have nephews and nieces that's growing up today. So my question today is, what are the recent local and state laws related to juveniles within the criminal legal system?
Mike, so Carrie, Judge Bloom, would you be interested in talking about just kind of some of the legislative changes or changes that may be happening on a local or state level with the juvenile system?
Yes, thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Mitchell, and sharing about yourself and for your continued interest in the development of juvenile law. So we all know, and hopefully we all know, that the law that passed at the end of last year, which got rid of life without parole for children or for offenses that happened when someone was a kid or under 18. So Ohio is now one of the states that allows kids, well, they're grown now, but they were kids when they were arrested and bound over and sent to adult prison. Ohio now allows them to apply for and have a parole hearing based on their conviction. So based on the title of their conviction on certain graduated time periods. So even though it took a long, long time, I remember probably about 7 years ago, we started talking about this in the State House. We started talking about it in the courts. Advocates didn't give up, and now we're here. So now our state is a state that says you should never be sentenced to prison, to die in prison for something that happened when you were a kid. It probably seems obvious to a lot of people, but the law moves very slowly, as we talked about earlier. Another thing that's happening, I believe either introduced already or maybe being introduced soon, are bills around the bind over processes that we have for kids. So being bound over means that an offense or an arrest happens when you are under 18, between the ages of 14 and 17, and your state court, your county court, moves to have you sent to the adult system. So then you're subject to adult sentences. I believe there are bills being introduced about that. There's one almost every session introduced. And although they're tough sells for some people, which is a conversation for a different day on why, they are still very important, and it's important to keep that in the front of everyone's mind. It's important to keep talking about why we are introducing those bills and the impact that they would have. So Mr. Mitchell, more to your point is what's happening locally here. So I'm in Hamilton County now. And we talked at the beginning of the hour where I got my judicial seat about 3 weeks ago. So there is change in the judiciary. So that's one thing that's happening, is there's change. Like I say, I've been a public defender my whole career, and who knew that a public defender can be a judge? We've got 2 of them in Hamilton County now. And it really is remarkable to see, you know, people with different perspectives working together. So that's one thing I can offer you, is that perspective has changed and conversations have changed. And although those are all mostly behind the scenes, they are happening. So the long and short of it is change is slow, but the focus on treating kids as kids is becoming more sharper and sharper every single day in the legislature, as well as here in our local courthouse, as well as trainings that we're offering our employees, as well as hopefully what we're offering to our law enforcement and our communities. And those aren't things that can be legislated, unfortunately. And they are, they're, as Ohio is famously a home rule state, we're home rule counties. So everything is particular to, of course, here in Hamilton County that I'm working on, but I can tell you that the perspective that we have here and the community working towards change here in our Hamilton County in our court, and Chastity can tell you that it's a lot of conversation and a lot going on. We are committed to treating children as children. So regarding your nephews, you know, you can hope for them to never come into my courtroom ever. But if I would ever happen to see you or see them, you can know that we are committed to seeing children as they are, meeting them as they are and where they are, and following the directives from the Supreme Court in Ohio, as well as the United States Supreme Court, saying that childhood is a right, and we should continue to work to provide that childhood to every kid.
Can I add a resource to that conversation? The Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth has really doing a great job in those spaces. In particular, I think Judge Bloom was referring to youth transfers to adult prisons and adult courts. And they've done some great work in researching and have some good publications on that issue. So it's the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of the Youth.
Thank you. Was there anything else that anyone else would like to contribute to the conversation in regards to the juvenile system? All right.
I would like to say one thing in regards to that real quick.
Absolutely.
The fact that we are putting juveniles in lockup, when the study shows that most people make their mistakes between the age of 16 and 26, is ridiculous to me anyway. We need better systems that start at our school age level around communication and accountability. And everything can be punished by locking people up. But I just want to put that out there.
I love that you just said that. I'm sorry, Mike, if you.
I just had a thought. I just had one thought. I want to get rid of reform. I don't like reform. Let's make laws that make sense the first time. We don't need to keep reforming stuff. The reason why we have reform is because we got broken laws. Let's make a law that works and that makes sense. We should not be. Criminal justice reform should not exist because the laws that they make that have been made as a part of the Constitution and part of all these different amendments. Let's make laws that make sense.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. And something that my colleague Rep. Brent said a little bit ago holds true to this conversation as well. Elections have consequences. And if we don't vote, and for those of you who've been left out, we have to work on opening the door so everyone is allowed, if you will, is able to come in and vote. But we cannot ever take our vote for granted because we can't change these laws to the positive until we have people sitting in those seats that are dedicated and committed to those reforms, because unfortunately right now so much of the criminal justice law needs major reform. So I agree with you wholeheartedly though. We shouldn't be in the situation we're in right now. One of the other things I wanted to say about incarcerating youth, I actually spent the first few years of teaching working with troubled youth, working with youth that were agitated delinquent, is the technical term. And we know that your brain is still developing. So Ray, exactly what you said. And again, we have to educate legislators, those people that pass these laws, to get them to understand that there are biological as well as societal reasons why a kid does what a kid does. And a whole lot of the time it's because their brain, their cause and effect hasn't fully developed. They just they haven't thought that far down the road. And so I think it also means that we have to, which is back to why empathy I think is so important. We got to figure out a way to deal with kids who are having trouble, not our trouble, but are having trouble, some kind of trouble. We got to deal with them in a more compassionate way. This idea of just locking them up is not the answer. But again, I'll just say, we've got to have more people in decision-making places that see children for what they are, children who need guidance. They don't need to be locked up. So some of it is just continuing to try to find those folks who really do see that the path towards helping those kids along is actually giving them a helping hand. Thanks.
And I just want to add one more thing, and that was lovely, Senator. Thanks for reminding us of all of that. But I just wanted to reply to what Mr. Mitchell said and about needing criminal justice reform, or even the phrase criminal justice reform, which becomes sort of this routine word that goes in one ear and out the other for a lot of times, a lot of folks, and honestly, even myself. And what I have to remind myself of, and others when we work together, is that it's criminal justice reform because that's what we call it, because criminal justice is the words that we chose a long time ago. But what it really is advancing civil rights. It's really protecting people who need protected. It's really doing the job that we as electeds, or we as community leaders, or everyone else as community leaders are here to do. And so even though we call it criminal justice reform, that might just be the way we sell it to those who aren't really excited about hearing it, or who aren't really excited about buying into the process. But what it really is looking back at all the things that we've done and deciding how can we best sell this to get it done. And so I'm with you saying the term criminal justice reform is like, oh, here we go. Another reform. But sadly, I think that part of that is that way we don't have to blame our old selves. We can just say going forward will be better. And so I appreciate what you're saying. I just wanted to acknowledge that I definitely agree with you about that.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that real quick, just because I've been through the DYS system and the adult system, and done, my studies, my in-depth studies, as you say, into this whole system. And the sad reality is that, as Mike can probably attest to, DYS is more traumatizing than prison is, and in so many ways, because you're a developing mind. You're torn away from your family, your parents, your school, your friends, on top of kids not having the emotional capacity as adults do. So, kids are way more brutal to each other, and there's nothing to do. So I just think the resolution to this revolves around having more, that education and healing. And I am a proponent of service work, but I understand that doesn't change the system. I understand that we need to invest more in that. We need to change some of these, as I believe Judge Bloom had mentioned, maybe some of these bind over laws, these mandatory bind over laws that judges just have no control over. When I was 15, I had caught an aggravated robbery case. I was misguided, and I was an impressionable 15-year-old kid. But if it was 3 months later, I might have gone to prison. And who knows? Then, at that time, I didn't have a clear outlook on life, and I could still be in prison today, so. But luckily, I went to DYS, where the system didn't give me much help. I guess what I'm trying to say, though, is that we really need to invest more in care for our youth and preventative measures. And if I could go back in time, I would have told myself to find what I love to do, what I'm good at, and what my passions are. And most of the time, these kids, 15, 16, committing robberies, committing violent offenses, selling drugs. Most of the time is not having that insight of who they are, not having a positive mentor, somebody to guide them to realize what they like to do, and just not having the resources they need. So, I'm strongly, suggesting that we just focus more on providing for kids and not locking them up, because that doesn't help at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for lifting that up. Any other thoughts around this area, or when we're talking around juvenile justice? Some really good points made by you all this afternoon.
I got one more point. It's a fun fact, but a not so fun fact. In Ohio, juveniles cannot buy alcohol or tobacco before a certain age, but they can go to prison. And that's crazy. You can't buy, because I guess you don't, it'll stop your development or different things of that nature, but you can go to prison at the age of 14 in Ohio. But you can't buy cigarettes and alcohol. Just as a thought.
Thank you, Mike, for lifting that up. That's why we're here. We got work to do. Representative Brent, were you about to say something?
Yes, and Mike, it's very true with what you said. That is something else that doesn't make sense here in the state, nor does it attract people to want to come to our state either. But particularly when you talk about our youth, we have to look at those at-risk factors before they even get there. So when we talk about schools, I have a district where one of my school districts spends about $150,000 per child. And then I have another school district that spends $23,000 per child. But the state is expecting the same results with different investments amounts into different children who literally live maybe like 3 miles away from each other. My district is very compact, but the wealth gap is so vast between one part of my district to the next. I have the wealthiest house district in the state in my district, but then I also have one of the poorer school districts within my house district too, all in one house district, the poorest and the wealthiest. And so when you talk about what you expect to happen to people's lives, is no different than how you invest into your own children within your own family. If you have your children and you're not investing into them, and you're investing a lot more into one child and not into another one, you're going to expect different things. Now, some kids are just going to be resilient no matter how much little or a lot you invest into them. But we know there's a thing called equity. So when we look at a lot of our kids who end up in the system, the investment has not been made into the system of equity into their lives. And so we have to talk about kids who, they don't have a bed to sleep on. They don't have a desk to utilize. This pandemic, even more than ever, has really just shown the lack of equity within our school districts. And you talk about the transition of some kids being able to have a smooth transition from being at home learning to being online because they always had a computer. They always had internet. But what about the kid who has to sit in front of the library? And now they're looking like they're doing trespassing because they're trying to do their homework in front of the library. And then because of that police officer who had a bad day, went and arrested that child for trespassing because the officer was having a bad day. And it becomes a series of events. As a rep, I get phone calls from grandmas, from a lot of grandmas who call me and say like, hey, ma'am, my grandchild is at home. We don't have internet. We can't really afford to get it. My credit's messed up. So even though we can get it for free, my credit's messed up and now I can't get internet. So we're standing out here in front of the library and the police just told me I can't stand out here in the middle of the evening and it's wintertime and it's cold. And so we have a system that just has not dealt with those at-risk factors and it forces people to put themselves in very odd situations. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna stop talking, sorry, because I can be talkative. I saw a kid one day, I was at the Family Dollar, who almost stole some peanut butter and some bread. And when I saw him about to leave out, I said, dude, I'll pay for it. And when you just think about the basic measures of just having bread and peanut butter, this child was trying to get home to their siblings. But because of that one little decision, could have landed that child in the juvenile system. And so we have to think, what is our school system? What are we doing as a community to make sure that people don't even have to make those type of decisions to even get there? So it's a lot of things of the have and the have-nots and becomes a cycle within itself. So we have to look at those at-risk factors of what's even getting our children into the system before they even get in the system completely.
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate everyone just lifting up these different pieces to this because I think that there's so many moving parts when we talk about this whole criminal legal system, the changes that we want to see. And, so we just have to always stay focused on like, this doesn't start at adulthood, right? It starts on this level. And so what are we doing to invest in communities and make sure that people are good? And there's so many situational issues that lead to people being detained and incarcerated. And those are the things that we need to start really looking at, and how these different systems intersect with one another. So we are going to now go to Chastity, and she's going to just share a little bit about herself, how she got into this work, and she's going to pose a question to our panel.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to come into this space to share my experience with the incarceration system and how I got here. My name is Chastity Bowman. I am the president of Opportunity People's Justice Leaders, formerly Ohio Prisoners Justice League. And I am also newly appointed chair for the prison committee for the NAACP here in Cincinnati. So I'm really excited about that. So today I choose empathy because of this guy right here, right behind me. I met him in 2016 and he swept me off my feet, and we fell into this unconventional relationship while he was incarcerated in Ohio's prisons. And we were actually married in one of Ohio's penitentiaries. Since then, I have strived to bring awareness to the unfair treatment that those that are incarcerated face on a daily basis. So that's how our organization came about. Last year in 2020, we took in over 2,500 calls and complaints and 1,100 emails concerning the conditions and things that were happening inside of Ohio's prisons. So what our organization ultimately does is we are a line of defense for families and those that are incarcerated to be able to express their experiences, what's happening to them inside of the facilities, giving resources to families, because we are the forgotten. We are the ones that we have to bear the cost of incarceration, and as well as the mental strain and stress that we take on due to incarceration. So I began my advocacy work because I started noticing things that were happening that were just wrong. The mental abuse, the physical abuse that happens to those that are incarcerated is not talked about, and it's a very dark place. And so we try to expose that and bring that to light and try to address it. So my question today is, a lot of times in our correctional system, we see correctional officers who commit criminal acts like assault, smuggling of drugs into our facilities. They commit criminal acts inside of our facilities, but we never hear about what happens to them unless it is just so extensive to the point to where it does end up in criminal court. Typically, we don't hear about what happens to correctional officers, wardens, and things of that sort. There's no accountability. So in the Fifth Circuit just denied qualified immunity for correctional officers. And I want to speak specifically to correctional officers, not police officers. We want to speak specifically to correctional officers. Will Ohio follow suit and deny qualified immunity for criminal acts that correctional officers commit in Ohio's prisons? And will we see oversight on our Correctional Institution Inspection Committee for any complaints that come in, because we as family members feel like that it's not that effective when we try to implement it and use it in our daily activities when we're trying to make complaints. So my two questions again are, will Ohio follow suit of the Fifth Circuit to deny qualified immunity for correctional officers? And can we see more oversight on the Correctional Institution Inspection Committee?
Thank you, Chastity. We do have Representative Crawley who has joined us. We want to welcome her and allow her to introduce herself. And then if you are interested in answering that question, that would be great.
No, can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, I am jumping on late. And if you see me talking and my mouth is a little weird, I had some dental work done and my mouth is swollen, so please forgive me. So my name is Erica Crawley. I represent Ohio's 26th House District, which is in East and Southeast Columbus. I am in my second term in the Ohio House. And so I would just say a little bit about my background before coming into the House. I did a lot of work in the nonprofit sector, working with children and families, children and in the perspective of working with child care centers, Black child care centers, helping them get accredited on a national level. And then I worked with Head Start, early Head Start programs as a healthcare coordinator. And then I worked with CASA, working with children who have been abused and neglected that are in the juvenile system. I then went to law school, and while I was in law school, worked with Family, Youth, and Law Center, still working with children who have been abused and neglected, and then ran for the House after I graduated from law school, which brings me here. My background is in criminology with a focus on juvenile delinquency. So this topic is a passion of mine, and really rethinking our juvenile system. To Chastity's question, which I do appreciate, when it comes to the Correctional Institution Inspection Committee, which I sat on last General Assembly, I'm not on that committee this year. When we were dealing with COVID, I did go into, so sitting on the Correctional Institution Inspection Committee, it allows you to walk into any prison in Ohio, state prison, at any point in time, unannounced, and do an inspection, talk to the warden, prison staff, and our incarcerated citizens. And so with that, I went into the Women's Reformatory Institution. I was not able to go into other ones because, COVID happened. But I did get a lot of complaints from families, not just in my district, but all across the state. And we had them investigated through our executive director. And also, like, I had a relationship with Director Chambers-Smith, and then some other people who would be able to give me feedback or reports on what happened. I have been in situations where I had some complaints investigated and had incarcerated citizens move to another facility, move to another place or another unit in the facility. And so those things do happen. Is it an effective system? Absolutely not. Does it need to be improved? It absolutely does. CIC and oversight in general. But when it comes to and so let me just say, from the DYS perspective, we know that last year there was a report that came out, and I'm sorry if you hear background, I'm in the policy office, but last year there was a report that came out from the Department of Justice that talked about sexual assault in youth detention centers, and Ohio's DYS facilities were in that report as one of the worst facilities that had a high level of sexual assault. In our facilities, the director, Guys, came before a finance committee a couple of weeks ago to talk about that report. I met with him during CIC last year. He came to my office twice. It is something that I take seriously. I asked about their reporting system. I asked about retaliation. They have revamped their whole way of doing things there, where youth can report assaults anonymously and not be retaliated. There have been staff who have been fired and will be held criminally liable for those assaults. They have been caught on tape. Some of them, and some were just reported anonymously by different incarcerated youth. So again, I just want to reiterate, there are things that are happening. Is it a flawed system? Absolutely. But that's what we're dealing with in the moment. And so there are things that have happened, or changes that are being, taken in the last year. I would say not even quite a year and a half, but things are in the works. As far as the Fifth Circuit, I'm not familiar with that case, but happy to look it up. What I can tell you about having officers in prisons being held accountable to, just like police officers, that is something that I'm working on. I do have a piece of legislation that will be coming out. I don't want to share it too soon, but we'll be holding police officers, all peace officers, as well as our officers that serve in our prison systems, held to the same standard when it comes to body cameras, when it comes to dash cameras, and when it comes to criminal and civil liability when they violate someone's constitutional rights. Will we get there as a state? If you just look at the the political climate of where this state is a very conservative state. Will it move? I'm not sure if it will move, but we will, me and my colleagues who feel very passionately about, I hate to even say police reform, because I don't know that that's something that can happen, but making changes to how our communities are policed and our citizens are policed. In this moment, there are changes that we are going to be pushing for and fighting for, and we'll need you, Chastity, your organization, everyone on this call to make sure that we are able to push that legislation forward. But we do have people, Brent can tell you, that we work with here in the state who aren't, are okay with people dying, or okay with people's rights being violated, and not having anyone be accountable for those things. And it's unfortunate because we are elected servants, and that's what we should be doing, but not everyone has the same thoughts and goals in mind. So I just want to say that those are things that are happening. Those are things that have taken place, and there's a system in place that is flawed, but it works at times. So thank you for that. I know it was a long answer, but I hope I covered the things that you wanted me to cover.
Thank you. And thank you we're glad that you're able to join even in the midst of you healing from the dental work. So we appreciate you being able to get on with us. So we're going to do one final question, and this is going to be open to the entire panel that Ray is going to bring to you all. And then we have a few questions in the chat. And so I'm going to try to, for anyone who can't stay on beyond that 1 o'clock hour, just to see if we can make sure that we get these questions answered. I think there may be 3 in the chat. So we'll just kind of go through those really quickly. And if 1 or 2 people want to have an opportunity to speak on it, we will. So Ray, go ahead with that final question for our group.
Thank you, Zaria. I first want to backtrack real quick. We were talking about the shackling, and we talked about that the shackling comes from having men in mind when we shackle. I just want to correct that and say shackling comes from having slaves in mind. You first have to dehumanize a person before you can put shackles on them. You don't put shackles on human beings. You put shackle on property and cattle. So I want to just clear that up first. This is an inhumane system. The second thing is I've been doing criminal justice reform for about 15 years now. And what I've noticed is that most criminals fit into 3 categories: economic category, mental health, and then other. And that other is like a very small percentage of a lot of different things. And it was very concerning in doing this research that there was no data behind the demographics of people we were putting in prison, the economic status of the people we were putting in prison, the housing status of people we were putting in prison. So the question is, when are we going to get to a point, or what does this legislation look like to where we have a comprehensive data collection system? So we have a full understanding of the people that we are putting in prison, the backgrounds they are coming from, and actually ultimately what they ultimately put in prison for. People aren't just out selling drugs because that's like the thing to do. They're trying to feed their family. We were trying to feed our families, and working a minimum wage job wasn't doing it, and that was our only alternative. People in prison for offenses like domestic violence, that is a mental issue from lack of communication at the elementary school level. But there's no data to back these points up, because the data will clearly show that we have an economic issue and a mental health issue in our society that needs to be addressed. So the question is, what are your thoughts around the data collection system, and how do we correct that?
Let me try from, again, national standpoint, and very quickly. That has been a huge issue. A lot of it comes out of direction from the Department of Justice. What a lot of advocates have asked for is a national standard for data collection within the the criminal justice system. That goes to a whole lot of ranges, including police data, data related to arrests, sentencing, all those things. There's a huge lag in statistics that come out of DOJ, a couple of years lag, because of absence of really good data collection and standardized that gets down to the jurisdictions. The biggest thing that we've asked for is disaggregated data. You'll get data that comes out of either correction system, police, but it's all aggregated. It doesn't make a difference between whether it's race, income, religion, all those things. And there's been huge resistance at the state and local level to really participate in a standardized national data standards that includes a prerequisite of having disaggregated data. And I'll finish with the whole issue around police encounters that result in violence or deaths even. And there aren't good data around why that encounter happened and whether or not it was Black, white, Latino. And they aren't required to collect it. So it may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Bottom line, you're absolutely right. There has to be some standard around that. It gets into that whole criminal legal system and a requirement for funding. That should be a requirement. So.
Do we have anyone else that would like to speak to the data collection here in Ohio? We know that this is a challenge. I know I do work in the pretrial system, and this is a challenge we constantly have. So if there's anyone else that wants to speak to this.
This is Rep. Brent to raise question or concern about data. Literally within the last biennial budget, there was actually a measure taken out so we would not collect that type of data here within the state of Ohio, which is so crazy because people felt like, oh, we could save us some money. That's what they were telling my colleague. We could save us some money by not including the data. And so when we're voting for the state budget, is a vote up or is a vote down? The same vote gives you your streets, your roads, your bridges, your libraries. Is the same budget that also gives you the ability to collect data. So that office that was actually collecting that data has been removed. I think it might've been like 4 people that worked in that office. They all got moved to other positions. So now, and I'm just shout out to Rep Stephanie House from House District 11, who's trying to put that back into the budget so we can start collecting that data information, which is so vital. So this is why I say like people will try to rationalize it as a budgetary thing, but we know long-term that we cannot, fight with facts if we're not collecting the data. And the state of Ohio has to do the basics, and that's collect the data to know to decide on how we're going to address the issue within the state. So thank you so much for bringing that up. You should come down and speak before the Finance Committee, which Rep. Crawley is the ranking member on. I know she would love to come hear you testify. They are having committee every day, Monday through Thursday here at the State House.
And if I could just add to what Rep. Brent just said, because it was the excessive use of force database. And so it was a statewide database that was supposed to be kept at the Attorney General's office. And so all police departments across the state were supposed to input any time that there was a complaint for use of force and excessive use of force complaint. It was the Fraternal Order of Police, the state lobbying to the state to remove that database in the last biennium budget. And you would think, well, why would they be trying to get rid of this database in the budget when we're dealing with, 100-something billions of dollars? Everybody thinks of it as funding, but sometimes policy goes through there and nobody is watching. So that's the thing. Nobody is watching for these little policy things that come up or get put into the budget, like removing the language requiring excessive use of force database. It's like a 1 sentence, right? And so if you're not looking for it, you wouldn't know that it was there or that it wasn't there. So when the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus had a meeting with the FOP last year to talk about right after George Floyd and all of the demonstrations, we were trying to get together to talk about what was going on and how were we going to move forward, either in partnership or not. And so one of the things that got brought up is why did you get rid of this use of force database? Now you're lobbying to for it to seem like you're trying to do something like, oh, we're going to establish this database because we're all about data collection, but it was already there. So now we're trying to get something back in the law and you want to make it seem like you all are doing us favors, but you were actually lobbying to have that removed because you did not want police officers and police departments to report that data. And the reason that was given as well, different police departments were using different measures to evaluate what would be an excessive use of force. And so they felt like it wasn't consistent across the board and across the state and across the departments. But I was like, well, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If there needed to be changes to the database, then that's something that you come to the state about. And if you need consistency across state or across police departments, then that's something that we could have worked on. But these things are like smoke and mirrors. And if you're not paying attention, then you don't know that it is taking place, and things happen in the middle of the night, just like Stand Your Ground got passed at 12 o'clock midnight, late in December, I think on the 23rd of December or something like that. And so things like this pass in the budget when we're dealing with millions of dollars. And so for those who want to advocate, we're dealing with the budget now. As Rep. Brent said, it has to pass by June 30th by state law. So just if you have areas that you're interested, you can go on to the Legislative Service Commission website and look at different areas. You could look at DYS, their budget and what they're spending money on. You could look at DRC. You can look at and see where our mental health dollars are going with the Department of Mental Health Services. So it will take your advocacy at the state level to bring an awareness of the things that matter most to you. So that's that on data collection. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? We're going to do one final comment, and then we're going to try to, like I said, we want to thank everybody who has come out. I know some people have to drop off, and Matt has put in the chat like just different links, as well as the link for our evening event, which is the national event, if anyone is interested in attending. Judge Baldwin, did you want to comment on this one?
I did. On data collection, that is huge. And I know Zaria's burdened with dealing with pretrial services, trying to document. And I am thankful through our process that we're going through. We have the full support of our county sheriff, who has given us access to all the jail data. And we have the ability to manipulate that data to get the information that we need. And one of the greatest words of wisdom I heard from a colleague in Michigan was, what doesn't get measured doesn't get fixed. So you can't say you want to fix a problem and not be willing to look at your data. So I encourage everyone to do that. We're doing that now. We will continue to do that. And my hope is that once we have a significant amount of data, we will be able to publish it on our website so people can see what we're doing, so we can put the data behind our success. So Ray, I encourage you to continue the fight, because we can't fix what we don't measure. Thank you.
Judge Bloom, did you have something? This is the good thing about having a team. They catch things you don't. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Just briefly, I would just add that now that the Chief Justice in our state has focused more on data collection, it seems like that's given cover to some local judges to be able to, I don't want to say blame her, but cite to her as to why we need the data when we're going to our staff and saying we're collecting it, because we collect all of that data on, we call them the 527 in Hamilton County, but in arrest form, all of that data is collected or should be collected by the officer when they're standing right there. And as a defense attorney, I've scrutinized, I've seen probably 10,000 of those, and the data is there. So, so we have it. What we have to do, so the collection maybe isn't the word that I want to use, the processing or the keeping or the retention or the manipulation of it, that to get out what we want to get out is what here we need to work on better. And so I am thankful for the Chief Justice for saying, hey, judges, do better. And you can't do better, like Judge Baldwin was saying, you can't do better until you know where your weaknesses are. You can't know your weaknesses until you see the data. And so the courts are sort of getting this message, some of them for the very first time, about collecting the data. And so again, I'll point back to myself and to other leaders in my county about it's on us to keep pushing that, because the need for the data is so clear, at least clear to us. And so anytime you hear somebody talking about the data or outside of these conversations, make sure you support them, you give them your ideas, give them your words, so that we have more of a vocabulary about why it's important to have this information.
Thank you. So we are a little over, as I mentioned. I knew we would be. We have several questions in the chat, and so what we're going to do, because I know we're not going to get to all of them, we are going to compile those questions, and then what we'll do is we'll send them to all of the panelists and give them an opportunity to answer, and then we will follow up with you all in an email, just to be able to provide the questions and answers, so that everyone will be able to have that. So I just want to take the time, first of all, to thank everyone who joined us, our Day of Empathy team here in Ohio, all of our panelists. We really appreciate just your contribution today for the National Day of Empathy. Again, there is an event that is starting at 5 o'clock this evening on a national level. And if you go to the website, which Matt has dropped in the chat, and we'll also add it to the chats on our streaming sites on Facebook, we welcome you to sign up and join. And then also, if you go to the Ohio event link on the Day of Empathy page, that is a way for us to continue to maintain contact with you in regards to the work that's being done, the things that were being shared, not only by our systems people, but also all of the groups that are represented here throughout the state of Ohio. So in the chat, you've gotten links to the various organizations that are represented. The individuals have put their direct information in there as far as how to reach them as well. So we just encourage you to stay engaged in this space. Again, as I stated at the beginning, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Day of Empathy happens yearly. Normally we would go to the actual, State House and meet with people, but we know because of COVID, we've had to change some things up. So I just appreciate the opportunity to moderate this panel as a person who is impacted by the system and an advocate in this space. It is always a pleasure to be in a space where we're talking about the change that we want to see and seeing the action being brought about, not only from the system side, but also from our community side. So I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. And we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And again, the questions that are in the chat that we were not able to get to, we will send out to our panelists and give them an opportunity to answer those and send them out. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to our next session. Everyone take care.